Thank you, Chair. And I just want to thank everybody for their input and for being here today and for the application that has come forward. And I will say, for those who don't know, I am a biologist. I have a PhD in ecology and evolutionary biology from UCSC. So I'm going to come at this from a little bit of a different perspective. And I actually hope that some of the industry folks are still online listening to our comments right now. Um, so I just want to make a few points. One, I had some concern, and I should also say, as a former banana slug and as a former UCSC employee, I've been within the UC system. I was within the UC system for around 11 years. And one thing that came up for me was just the UCSC, that the UC has a sustainability policy. And I see on some levels that this fits within that under the water consumption, but then I see it not fitting around the issue around waste because one of the goals in the area of the sustainability policy is zero waste. And I'll also say for the public, I sit on the Santa Cruz County Integrated Waste Management Task Force. And one of the things we look at is end of life for all the different things that we're throwing away. And so for example, when we talk about things that are compostable and we move policies forward saying we're going to, move forward with composting materials, the question is, do you have a site that can actually compost those materials? And if you don't have a waste site near you that can compost those materials, it goes straight into the landfill. And so for me, one of the big issues that came up is the fact that there may be a site close by that could recycle. That's not good enough because there's a good chance they can't recycle. And then all this goes in the landfill every 10 years. And so that's a big issue for me around the piece around plastics and what we're trying to do with plastics. And I'll just say, just for folks' information, here in Monterey Bay, they find microplastics at every single depth within the Monterey Bay. And that's why it's so important that we are trying to do everything we can to reduce microplastics going in our environment. Secondary treated water is great for watering. And if that's something that we can continue to do and refine on these types of fields, I think it's much more sustainable than moving towards something that's plastic. I did also want to comment on some of the statements that were made. One was around the use of pesticides. And so the nice thing about having computers that we can kind of Google and fact check. UCSB sustainability plan in 2020, they converted all of their grounds equipment to zero emission. So this notion that they're going to have to maintain these fields with, lawnmowers that are going to be giving off gas emissions, I find that to be, well, just based on what I read on UCSB's website, that was not true, and the statements that were made were misleading. Also, the integrated pest management plan states that UCSB uses the least toxic chemical pesticide possible, and the use of chemicals and pesticides are only in targeted locations for targeted species, and that chemical pesticides are considered a last resort under the tenets of the integrated pest management plan. So again, I felt that statement around pesticides, leaching, and all these concerns around that very misleading to the board. Um, and again, really pointing to the issues around the carbon footprint. I mean, we don't know how long it takes for these things to break down. We don't know what they can be recycled into, and we don't know when end of life is for this type of material. But it's not something that's going to biodegrade within probably our lifetime. Whereas we know that the grass fields are able to capture carbon. It sounds like we're able to use secondary water, and we're not, and the carbon footprint's much lower. So I'm fully supportive of the staff recommendation on this one. If you all want to work with them, and if the industry can come up with something that's more biodegradable and more environmentally friendly, that'd be great. But I just didn't hear enough here today to understand how this would be a sustainable and viable option, given all the issues that we're facing with trying to keep plastics out of our environment.
Thank you, Commissioner. Commissioner Eckerly?